Welcome everybody, this is How to English, Teach and Learn with Gav and Em.
It's a podcast about teaching and learning English as a foreign language.
All opinions stated are personal and references will be given when necessary.
Em, Season 3, Episode 10. The title this time will be...
What did you decide?
Decided later.
TBA, to be announced. We haven't quite got it yet.
I think we should call it the environmental crisis.
That is good. I was thinking your carbon footprint.
How about you and your environment?
That's also good. How about 1.5 is your responsibility?
That's good, but it's not very catchy.
No, it's not.
We could try teach and learn about the climate.
That is good. It's quite long.
It's a bit long.
I think we have to think about it. CO2 and you.
Oh, I like that. That's brilliant.
But that sounds like it's your friend, which it isn't. Well, it kind of is. And it is and it isn't.
Well, we need to find a balance. So
let's just tell our followers one of us is right, or maybe neither of us, but we'll have a title eventually.
That's right. Well, let's just begin, Em, because it's time to begin Gav and Em's podcast. And the topic is climate, carbon, footprints. What does it all mean, Em? Because I think we've already discussed this topic back in the dark ages of podcasting. It was episode 39. It was called The Environment. Do you remember what we talked about?
Lots of things. It was a really good episode. I remember thinking I was really proud of it because we just did so much. There were some really interesting statistics and eye-opening facts.
You're right. And we did cover things like our physical environment where we were teaching or learning English, and also the environment that surrounds us and climate change and how we can reduce the impact that we have on our environment.
Yes, that's right. I think we did talk about the classroom and all the things in the classroom, but today we are focusing more on the world and the effects of being in this world and our impact on it.
We did specifically go into details regarding tech, because I know we both use tech in our teaching, Em. For example, we mentioned that there were 36 grams of CO2 every hour of streaming video. Say, for example, if you're on your favourite video streaming website, you might be on YouTube. Wherever you are using 36 grams of CO2 every hour, which, compared to 15 grams of CO2 from a boiling kettle, which takes around 2 minutes. And a web search, Em, I remember we discussed, and I think it's around 0.2 grams of CO2 according to Google.
We don't think about this stuff. Well, I didn't before you told me about it. And thank you, Gav, because a couple of weeks ago you suggested that I get a new app on my phone.
What app was that, Em?
It was a search engine because we all go with the default. I think we all use the one with the big G.
Is that Microsoft Edge?
No, not that one. But I didn't even think about the fact that I could be using an alternative browser. And you said, Em, I found this really amazing new thing, this new app that plants trees every time you search. And I said, Gav, that's not possible. How does it do that? And you said, I've looked into it. It's legit. Get it. Ecosia. Or Ecosia, maybe? I'm well impressed. It's a very efficient, very good search engine, and I get a little icon that tells me how many trees I've planted.
That is so cool. I would totally recommend that. I will put a link in the show notes for everybody to give it a try and plant some trees. There's a lot of language there that I'm not entirely sure I followed, because we were talking CO2, carbon footprint, the environment, climate change. So what do we mean by a carbon footprint?
That is the amount of carbon dioxide, CO2, released into the atmosphere as a result of your activities, what you're doing individually or as an organisation or as a community.
But of course, carbon isn't the only greenhouse gas we should be concerned about. There's also methane, nitrous oxide, and others.
Methane's the one that comes from cow burps, isn't it?
It is.
Cow farts and cow burps.
The front and the back.
Apparently the burps are worse than the farts, which I didn't know.
I've heard that. But carbon dioxide is the one that most people focus on because it's produced when we burn fossil fuels.
What are fossil fuels?
Well, also known as hydrocarbons, they are coal, crude oil, natural gas, and peat. And these release gases which trap heat in the atmosphere, raising the temperature and causing global warming or climate change.
And what does the rise in temperature do?
Well, according to NASA, humans have increased the amount of atmospheric CO2 concentration by 48% since pre-industrial times. That has resulted in a global temperature increase of 1 degree. It means the ice caps are melting, causing sea levels to rise, changing the inhabitation where plants and animals can live. On top of that, we've seen all the news stories of hurricanes, wildfires, floods, droughts across the world, which are unlike anything we've seen in the past. And sadly, the people who are being most affected are the people who had the lowest carbon footprint, who live in developing countries. Basically, the richer you are, the more damage you're doing to the environment.
That seems really unfair. So we should be using renewable fuels and live more sustainably to prevent this increase in the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. And we need to find ways to reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere.
Yes, the target is to stay below 1.5 degrees by increasing our use of renewable energy, such as
solar, wind, hydro energy, nuclear. I think there's also geothermal, biomass.
Thank you, Em. And through living more sustainable lives for future generations to safely live on our planet.
And the target is to cut carbon emissions by half by 2030 and to be carbon neutral by 2050, although many countries, businesses and individuals have pledged to cut the carbon emissions sooner.
So, how can we go about that, Em?
According to a lot of experts, we need to take 3 steps.
What are those steps, Em?
First one is to measure, which I guess is to measure or know how much CO2 you are using or contributing to the environment. Second, after you know that, you need to reduce it, which we are going to go into a bit more detail today. And then thirdly, offset it. What does that mean, Gav?
Offsetting is a way of compensating for the emissions that you're still producing. And this could be through a number of schemes, but we'll come to that later. Most important things are the first 2 steps, as you said, Em, which are to measure and then to reduce.
In that order. So what you've heard so far, everybody, is a summary of the situation with some very useful vocabulary, I think. So students out there, you could probably go through the transcription, checking those words. And teachers, maybe if you want to use this in your lesson, you could do a gap fill of some kind, practicing that language. It's a nice introduction to talking about the environment. But there it becomes a little bit difficult, I think, to get students excited, engaged, discussing, maybe. I mean, some people are really interested in this.
You know what we need, Em?
What do we need, Gav?
A really good quiz.
You love quizzes, and I agree with you here. This is the right time.
I love being the quiz master. I'm not sure I love quizzes.
All right, but you're right. It's the perfect opportunity to have a quiz and something more interactive that everybody can do in the group or individually, one-to-one lesson on your own even, if you're self-studying. And we've found one, haven't we? We've found a really good one.
We have, which contains all of the language that you need to discuss this topic.
With some very, very interesting results that will generate a very interesting conversation or debate, perhaps.
That's good. And also has some suggestions of how you can reflect on the results from this quiz.
So where's the quiz from?
It's from the WWF. Not the wrestling people, but the wildlife people.
The one with the panda.
And they recommend this questionnaire, and it's divided into 4 sections. And basically, you answer multiple choice questions, and at the end, it will give you the results of your carbon footprint.
So you found this, Gav, and you sent it to me, and we have both completed this quiz before we are recording this podcast episode. So I haven't told you my results.
I don't know what your results are, and you don't know what mine are. The winner is the person with the highest or the lowest score?
Of course, the winner is the person with the lowest carbon footprint.
What am I talking about?
I don't know. Let me explain how the quiz works. Once you complete the quiz, it gives you a percentage result, and ideally you want that to be at 0%. Of course, this is nearly impossible at the moment, as so much of our energy is created from fossil fuels, for example, but we should try to get as low a percentage as we can. Then you're given your carbon footprint in metric tonnes. The quiz sets a target of 10 tonnes per person per year, which means you're in line to reducing your carbon emissions to 0 by 2045.
So getting 100% means that you've reached the target of 10 tonnes per year, and anything below that means you're doing really well. But don't forget, the aim is to eventually be carbon neutral, which is 0. Okay, here are the results. Drum roll.
Okay, stop the drum roll. I'm covered in slobber now, thank you.
73%.
Not bad. I was 71%, which is below the target, but a long way from 0.
So what's that in tonnes, Em?
That is 7.47 tonnes, which isn't enough, but it's a good start.
Mine is 7.68 tonnes, which isn't as good as yours. Maybe it's all the time I spend on Instagram.
Probably.
Well, now that we've measured our carbon footprints, let's move to the second part where we can think about reducing them.
The quiz was divided into sections where it makes it quite easy to identify the areas that you could work on. You could really focus on reducing in that area. So, Gav, what were the sections?
The quiz was divided into food, travel, home, and stuff.
Okay, we've all got stuff, haven't we?
So let's begin with food. Now, I read in ourworldindata.org that your food carbon footprint can be 1/3 of your total footprint, Em.
I think about that, eat, sleep and work. That's pretty much it, isn't it? That's life. So that is a big part of life.
That's true. So 1 kilo of beef is equivalent to 27 kilos of carbon, which is about the same as driving 63 miles in a car, compared to 1 kilo of lentils, which are the equivalent of 0.9 kilos of carbon. That's the equivalent of driving around 2 miles by your car.
So that beef includes all the land required for the cows to eat and be reared, and then the production of making the animal into the meat, and then the transportation of the meat, the storage of the meat, all of that is included in that number, yeah?
That's right. So one of the questions in the quiz that I thought was particularly interesting, Em, in a week, how much do you spend on food from restaurants, canteens and takeaways? And I thought to myself, why is this important? I love getting a takeaway, or I love going to a local restaurant. According to the WWF, they say your diet is an important part of your carbon footprint. Did you know food bought in restaurants has a wider footprint than food you buy to cook at home? Do you know why, Em?
Not sure. Maybe because you have to employ people and those people have to get to the restaurant and cook it en masse in big quantities, and some food is wasted if it's not eaten.
Those are all good explanations. Well, the WWF say because of the overheads in the restaurants, as you mentioned, the emissions associated with heating, lighting and cooking for your meal, food from takeaways has additional packaging and additional transport emissions from the means of getting it from the restaurant to your home. So I think my answer for the first question, in a week, how much do you spend on food from restaurants, canteens and takeaways? £0, £1 to £10, £10 to £50 or more than £50. I'd probably say £10 to £50, but Maybe that's something that I could work on and reduce just a little bit. I do love my takeaways.
Fair point.
Some other solutions, Em, for reducing our food-associated carbon footprint. Have you got any suggestions for us?
Cut down your food miles by eating locally if you can, and buy food that's in season. Limit the packaging.
And having the carbon footprint actually printed on the packaging next to the nutritional information could be a really good way to track how far your food is travelling.
That would be great. Yeah, I would love that information. I think the big one is eat less meat or no meat if you can. Try not to throw food away. I think that's a big one.
And I've read that 1.3 billion tonnes of food are wasted every year across the world, according to the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. That's 1/3 of all food produced for human consumption.
It's a lot of work to think about your food, plan it, not buy it if you don't need it, eat it before you need to throw it away. But we do need to think about this stuff. So I'm going to talk about travel, Gav. This was section 2. And the big question, of course, the big question was, what kind of vehicle do you travel in most often as a driver or a passenger? Options were a car, a motorbike, or neither. I walk, cycle, or use public transport wherever possible. We know that the best method of transport would be which of those options, Gav? Best for the environment, I'm talking about.
I was going to say, what, the fastest one?
No, the best for the environment, as we are discussing.
I think walking is really good for the environment. Of course, it's not always possible. There are times where you just need to get from A to B on something considerably faster than your feet.
That is true.
Therefore, I would definitely say public transport is fab. Again, if you don't have good public transport where you live, you then have to go up to the next option above that was the bike.
Yeah, and that's a really eco-friendly, cost-effective option if you don't have to travel too far. All these eco-friendly methods reduce the cars on the road, ease the congestion, but there are times you need to drive, and we still have cars. And if you have to drive, the advice is to reduce the weight in the car as much as you can so that it's more fuel efficient, and check your tyre pressure, because you'll get better mileage out of your car if the tyres are in good condition. And if possible, which is an interesting one, reduce your speed by 10 miles an hour as an overall average.
Unless you're driving 10 miles an hour, and then you just stop.
Yes, but just try and reduce your speed, because that will help reduce your fuel consumption. And fuel is a big one, isn't it, at the moment?
This is a great activity. I can imagine asking my students how they could make their journey in their car more efficient.
That's a really good idea. And can I just add an extra little bit of information? Because I never thought about business trips, Gav. Who is responsible for that carbon footprint if you work for a company and you have to take a business trip?
The company.
The company. It's not on you. It's not on you. It's on them. So question that business trip, perhaps, if somebody's telling you need to go to Shanghai for a 30-minute meeting.
Unless they threaten to fire you, and then just do what you have to do. Try to offset it later.
Within reason, yeah.
Of course, try to go electric. In every modern city these days, you've got the scooters, you've got electric bikes, you've got city cars that are powered by electricity, there's car share options. So just think about how inefficient your car is. If it's not sitting in a traffic jam on the way to work, your car is probably sitting on your drive or a car park space. So just think about how inefficient this is. It's the second biggest purchase that you might make in your life after your house. And experts are saying that the future is definitely car sharing. So try to keep this in mind going into the future.
I read a statistic the other day saying about the average number of people in a car was just 1.2. So that's a lot of cars with only one person in them. That's a lot of space.
That's just not efficient, Em. And as you mentioned, business trips. Skip the business trip, have an online meeting. Section 3 is home. Now, we all love talking about our homes. And just think about how we might be able to reduce some of the carbon footprint that we create while we're in our homes. One of the questions from the quiz was, Do you regularly turn off lights and not leave your appliances on standby? So this brings me to the question, Em, what is a vampire device?
I only found this out last week and I had to think quite hard about it, and then I realised what it was. So it's something that sucks the electricity out of your energy supply.
What's this something?
It could be a television on standby, a clock maybe, like an alarm clock that's always lit up on the digital display. It could be a phone charger that you just don't take out of the wall socket. They're all just ticking over with this little amount of charge in them. So advice is turn off and unplug and try and reduce that. You can save actually quite a lot of money as well. Really important at the moment.
Exactly. As the price of fuel goes up, we're all having to pay more on our electric bills.
And I guess we can think about, do we need electric toothbrushes, electric can openers, electric this, electric that? Of course, if you need it, use it. But maybe if you don't need it, it just doesn't need to be electric.
So we're thinking sustainable. We obviously don't want people's lives to be more difficult, but just think about this long term. Some other solutions for the home, Em, might be to wash your clothes at a lower temperature.
Good tip.
You could also change the energy fueling your home, so you might be able to switch to a renewable source if possible.
Energy saving light bulbs, of course. Always turn off taps whenever you're not using them.
Recycle, reuse.
Definitely. So the final topic was stuff. There was a lot of stuff in the stuff topic, and I was interested in quite a few things, but I'm just going to focus on the amount of money that you spend on clothes and footwear per month. So £0, £1 to £50, £50 to £150, or £150 plus. And we know that we're living in a fast fashion world now.
What do you mean fast fashion, Em?
People want new stuff. They just want something for a season that they can wear and then get rid of, maybe throw away and buy something new. And this is literally killing the world. This global supply chain has created such a demand that people have got used to this, next day delivery, clothes online that you can have in your home the next day. It is great. It's lovely to have a new look, but it is really bad for the environment. So this disposable fashion is just creating this demand that has such a big supply chain with transportation and production. There are also issues with fair pay and all that as well, but just from the environmental side, it's really destructive. So the advice is it's better just to buy one really well-made item, not so often. You'll have it for longer, it will be better quality, it will last you, and that will cut out that massive process completely. And think a bit more about second-hand clothes, Gav, because a lot of second-hand shops actually sort the clothes so that you only really get the good stuff. And the good stuff can be really good quality, branded names, just maybe worn a couple of times. So our stigma of charity shops needs to change, or second-hand shops needs to change, because they're really good places to find good quality bargains.
I absolutely agree. So don't buy new stuff, use them longer, go to charity shops, because when you buy second-hand stuff, this way you're reusing things and also giving cash to charities. So it's a win-win.
And one just really small thing that I thought about after the quiz was they had a question about pets. And that is also something to consider, that your pet has a carbon footprint or a carbon paw print. So even though this isn't you, it still is you. And all that food and stuff for your little foofy or whatever is having an impact on the environment.
Oh, there's just so much to think about, Em. It's such a big topic. But of course, we don't want Foofy to go without Foofy's favourite toys.
But maybe Foofy could play with a knotted up t-shirt that you don't wear anymore.
That's a great idea.
It's a great toy.
Wow.
You don't have to buy the plastic bone or whatever.
That's right. So we managed to cover a lot of tips on, firstly, how to measure your carbon footprint, and then we gave a few examples of how we might reduce it too. So remember to reduce before even thinking about going to the third step in the journey. to having less of a negative impact on the planet. To help us with this topic, I would like to introduce Sara Do Carmo, who promotes green sustainable living on her Instagram page. On her page, she highlights slow fashion, being a flexitarian, having an eco life, environmental facts, and she is also an ambassador at My Green Pod, where you can get 10% off ethically produced organic, plastic-free and vegan products. So let's listen to Sara tell us more about her journey to becoming environmentally conscious.
Hello everyone, my name is Sara and I'm really happy to be here and talk about my sustainable journey, and I thank Gav and Em at How to English Pod for this opportunity. One of the most frequent questions people ask me is when I started being conscious about our planet. Since childhood I've liked to watch David Attenborough's program, and he still remains an inspiration for me and so many millions of people. My mom has told me this story many times. So when I was around 4 years old, I was walking with her and I saw a man dropping rubbish. I I picked it up and I gave to him because I thought that he dropped, not that he done on purpose. Because at that age, I already knew that something was wrong about doing that, about destroying our planet. So recently I started paying more attention to what is happening on our planet, and I decided that I need to do something to reduce my impact. Maybe you already heard scientists saying that this decade is decisive. So, why is that? The scientists agreed that if the average temperatures increase to more than 1.5 degrees Celsius compared with the global temperatures before the Industrial Revolution, we will have catastrophic consequences. And at the moment, we are already 1 degree warmer. 1.5 degree doesn't look like a big problem, but imagine having a constant fever. That's our planet at the moment. An example of a delicate ecosystem that is suffering the consequences of rising global temperatures is the coral reefs. Coral reefs make just 1% of the ocean, but they provide a home to around 25% of the whole world's marine life. An increase of 1 degree in this ecosystem leads to stress, making these corals lose their colors and dying. This is called coral bleaching. Another consequence is the melting of the ice caps. If the emissions continue to rise, the Arctic will be ice-free in the summer by the 2040s. And that, of course, will affect the sea level and all the biodiversity that depends on the ice. These are some of the consequences that nature will suffer with climate change, but we are dependent on nature, so we will suffer the consequences too. Wildfires, droughts, severe storms, loss of biodiversity, rise of sea level, and heat waves will affect access to water and food. Climate refugees are a reality, and the World Bank estimates that more than 200 million people are likely to migrate over the next 3 decades because of extreme weather. Knowing all this information can be scary, but we have so many positive examples of cooperation that gives me faith in a better future. I'm hopeful that we can turn these things around, and I believe that each one of us can make a difference. It is with this optimism that I started making some changes in my daily life, and these changes can be simple. The first and easiest change that I made were having a reusable water bottle and a reusable shopping bag. The reusable water bottle even helps me save money because drinking tap water can save you £300 a year, and actually tap water is more regulated and healthier for you. Recently, I have been changing for more eco-friendly products in my hygiene routine. For example, I use a soap bar, my shampoo is also in a bar, my toothpaste is in tablet form, and my skincare is also plastic free, and I can send it to the company for a refill. In the kitchen, we do meal planning and eat leftovers. We use beeswax and silicone lids to cover containers and fruit and vegetables. The dishwashing liquid is chemical free, and the sponge is plastic free. A regular sponge contains plastic, and every time you use it, this releases microplastics into the water system. I also quit fast fashion 2 years ago, fast fashion is a term used to describe the clothing industry that focus on mass production at low costs, meaning that the workers that don't have basic rights. Now I buy my clothes in vintage and charity shops or swap with friends and family. But don't forget that the most sustainable product is the one you didn't buy. Just the fact you reduce your consumption, you're already doing a lot for our planet. As you see, there are so many easy options to live a more eco-friendly life, and those options can actually save you money. If you need any advice or want to share your sustainable journey, reach out to me at Sara Do Carmo. Thank you for listening to me. Bye.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really interesting and educational. I feel like I've actually learnt a bit more already about the environment and the part that we play in trying to improve things. That story about littering, I can see how children don't understand why people would want to throw rubbish on the floor. I personally think littering is a terrible habit and I wish people wouldn't do it. It's so sad.
Definitely. And it's sometimes just small things that can make a big difference. I think there were some good examples there about washing detergent and sponges and water bottles and shampoo, all this stuff. We go and buy it. We just need to reach for a different product. Maybe sometimes it's a bit more expensive, but it is for a good reason.
These are long-term costs, Em. What we're paying now maybe is saving climate catastrophes for future generations. As Sarah identified, all of these problems that we're facing with our climate can be solved if we work together. We can create huge positive changes in the world.
And also, Gav, we have to put our vote where it counts too. I think we can all make these small changes, but it's also the people in power that have all that responsibility. And the only way you're going to get big change is by changing the people who make the decisions. And that will bring about the changes we need.
You're right, and I think it's happening bottom up, Em, because there are so many fantastic communities, organisations, groups of people like Extinction Rebellion, Fridays for Future, which are organised by young people who are going out on the streets and they're demanding that people in power to listen to them and think about how we can implement changes that will have positive impacts into the future for future generations, Em. This brings us naturally to our third point, which is to offset. And remember, only go to this step once you have reduced your carbon footprint as much as possible. Really challenge yourself to get down to as few grams of carbon as possible. So with carbon offsetting, you can consider buying carbon credits, which means that trees can be planted, communities can be supported in developing countries to use alternative forms of energy, like efficient cooking stoves, for example, or pay for carbon to be directly sequestered from the air.
Okay, can I ask a question? Because a lot of the time I see a button that says offset my whatever, offset my flight, offset my journey. How do I know that the money is going to the right place?
Well, there are lots of schemes to take part in to offset your carbon footprint. Of course, you have to read the terms and conditions for many of these offsetting programs, but for trustworthy and reliable information on offsetting your carbon footprint, choose projects accredited by Gold Standard.
I've heard of them. I've heard of Gold Standard, and I have a little background. It was established in 2003 by WWF and other international NGOs. NGO, Gav? What's NGO?
Non-governmental organisations.
Yes, so those NGOs and WWF established it to ensure that projects reduce carbon emissions and that they follow the highest levels of environmental integrity and contribute to sustainable development. And then there was the Paris Climate Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals.
SDGs, very important, and we're going to do a whole show on these in the future.
So there are best practices implemented, ways of checking it, and you can trust that Gold Standard will invest your money wisely.
Great. I will put a link in the show notes if people are interested in some of those projects. They are absolutely invaluable ways of offsetting your carbon footprint. Em, it's been a pleasure as usual. I'm going to go home. I'm going to think about reducing my carbon footprint even further so that I can be proud of myself and future generations will not want to kick me in the face.
That's the goal.
See you next time, Em.
Bye.
Bye.